Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The phone rang at 2:47 in the morning. And in the space between the first ring and the second, 9 years of silence shattered like glass dropped on marble. Dominic Ashford was awake. He was always awake at this hour, wandering the 40 rooms of a penthouse that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. But when the unknown number flashed across his screen, something made him stop mid-stride. Something made him answer. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice he had spent nearly a decade trying to forget and failing every single night. Dominic. One word. His name spoken in a tone so controlled it could cut through steel. And yet beneath that control, something trembled. Something fractured. Serena. He said her name like a man who had just been punched in the chest. Like prayer and profanity combined. Like the last word a drowning man speaks before the water takes him. I would not call if there was any other choice. Her voice was clinical now. Deliberately emptied of the warmth that had once made his cold world feel habitable. And that emptiness terrified him more than anything she could have screamed. I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? He could not speak. Could only make a sound of acknowledgement as his hand gripped the phone so hard the case cracked beneath his fingers. When I left you, I was pregnant. 6 weeks. I did not know until after the divorce was final. The bedroom tilted. The floor seemed to shift beneath his feet. Dominic reached for the edge of his desk to steady himself, but his hand found only air. You have sons. Twins. Their names are Julian and Sebastian. They are 8 years old. Each word landed like a separate blade, each one cutting deeper than the last. Sons. Twins. 8 years old. 8 years of birthdays he never knew. 8 years of first steps and first words and scraped knees and bedtime stories. 8 years of 2 lives growing somewhere in the world without any knowledge that their father existed. And they have been taken, Dominic. Someone took our boys. And they are demanding something only you can give them. The room stopped spinning. Everything stopped. The city lights outside his window, the hum of the air conditioning, the beating of his own heart. All of it frozen in the space between her words and his understanding. I need you to come. Tonight. I need you to help me save the children you never knew existed. Dominic was already moving. Already reaching for his keys, his wallet, his jacket. The reflexes of a man who had built an empire on decisive action, finally serving something that actually mattered. Where are you? The Meridian Hotel. Room 714. And then her voice cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to shatter whatever remained of his composure. And Dominic. If you bring lawyers, or security teams, or anyone who might spook these people, our sons will die. Come alone. Or do not come at all. The line went dead. Dominic Ashford stood in his bedroom. The same bedroom he had once shared with the only woman he had ever loved. The room that still smelled faintly of her perfume because he had never let the cleaning staff change the curtains. And he felt something that had been dead for 9 years roar back to life in his chest. He had sons. Twins. 8 years old and in danger. And their mother. The woman his lawyers had once called expensive. The woman he had thrown away like she was a liability instead of the only thing that ever made him human. She needed him. For the first time in nearly a decade, Dominic Ashford ran. Not toward a boardroom. Not toward a deal. Not toward any of the hollow victories that had filled his empty years. He ran toward something that mattered. Toward the chance to save what he had destroyed. Toward 2 boys he had never met and a woman he had never stopped loving. But to understand why this phone call changed everything, we need to go back. 9 years back. To the morning when Dominic Ashford made the worst mistake of his life. To the moment when fear became a weapon, and love became a casualty, and one man's pride cost him everything worth living for. This is a story about second chances. About the price of doubt and the cost of silence. About 2 boys who grew up without a father and a woman who built an empire of survival from the ashes of betrayal. And if you believe in second chances, stay with me. Because this story is just getting started. The morning began like any other morning in their life together. Sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden rectangles across silk sheets and polished hardwood floors. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building Dominic had purchased outright, not because he needed the space, but because when you build an empire from nothing, you learn to claim territory, to make your mark, to prove that you exist in ways the world cannot ignore. But on this particular morning, none of that mattered. What mattered was the woman moving through their bedroom with that particular grace that had first stopped his heart at a charity gala 3 years prior. Serena. Her honey-brown skin caught the early light like something precious, something worth more than every building he had ever owned. She was humming something soft. A lullaby her grandmother used to sing, she had told him once, though she could never quite remember the name of it. "You are staring." She said it without turning around, arranging fresh flowers in a vase she had bought from a street vendor on their walk last weekend. The vase had cost $12. It sat on a table worth $15,000. And somehow, impossibly, the $12 vase was the most beautiful thing in the room. "I am admiring. There is a difference." She laughed, and the sound filled every corner of the penthouse, warming spaces that had been cold and sterile before she arrived. Before her, this place had been a showroom, a monument to wealth that felt more like a museum than a home. She had changed that. She had changed everything. "You have a board meeting in 2 hours. Stop admiring and start showering." Dominic smiled. Actually smiled, which was something he rarely did before her. The expression felt foreign on his face sometimes, like a language he had forgotten and was only now relearning. He watched her adjust the flowers, turning them slightly to catch the light better. She was wearing one of his shirts, the sleeves rolled up past her elbows, her feet bare on the cold floor. She looked like she belonged here. She looked like she had always belonged here. And the truth was, she did. More than he ever had. When Dominic had first met Serena, she had been working as a counselor at a women's crisis center. The charity gala was a fundraiser for the organization, one of those events where wealthy people wrote checks to feel better about themselves and then went back to their lives unchanged. Dominic had attended out of obligation, prepared to write his check and leave within the hour. Then he saw her. She was wearing a dress that probably cost less than his watch, standing near the silent auction table, laughing at something one of the volunteers had said. And when she laughed with her whole body. Her shoulders shook. Her eyes crinkled. She threw her head back like joy was something worth surrendering to completely. He could not look away. Later, when he finally worked up the courage to introduce himself, she had looked at his extended hand, then at his face, then back at his hand with an expression of mild amusement. "I know who you are," she said. "Your face is on the side of 3 buildings I pass on my way to work." Most people would have been impressed, or intimidated, or immediately calculating how to leverage the connection. Serena just looked tired. "Must be strange," she continued, "seeing your own face that large. Does it ever feel like you are being watched by yourself?" It was such an odd question. Such a human question. No one had ever asked him anything like it before. People asked about his net worth, his investment strategies, his opinion on market trends. No one asked how it felt to be him. Sometimes, he admitted, sometimes it feels like that person on the building is someone else entirely. Someone I am supposed to be but never quite became. She had studied him then. Really studied him, like she was reading words written beneath his skin. "That is the saddest thing I have heard all night," she said. "And I work with women fleeing domestic violence, so that is saying something." He had laughed. Actually laughed. And she had smiled, and something had shifted between them, some tectonic plate of fate moving beneath the surface of their lives. Their courtship had scandalized his circle. His chief financial officer had mentioned prenuptial agreements so many times that Dominic had eventually threatened to fire him on the spot. His mother had suggested, with the particular venom only mothers can deliver, that Serena was playing a long game. His business partners had made comments about gold diggers and social climbers that Dominic had chosen to ignore rather than confront, a decision he would come to regret. But he had never been more certain of anything than he was of Serena. She did not want his money. She wanted him. The real him. The man underneath the empire who was exhausted from being seen as a bank account with a heartbeat. She had refused to quit her work when they married, despite his offers to fund any project she wanted. "I need to be useful," she had explained. "Not comfortable. Useful." And so she had continued counseling women in crisis, coming home with stories that reminded Dominic the world was bigger than quarterly returns and property acquisitions. She had kept him grounded. Had reminded him that wealth was a tool, not an identity. Had made him feel, for the first time in his adult life, like he was actually living instead of just accumulating. "What are you thinking about?" Her voice pulled him back to the present. She was watching him now, flowers forgotten, her head tilted in that way she had when she was trying to read his thoughts. "That I do not deserve you." She crossed the room, bare feet silent on the hardwood, and kissed his forehead. "Probably not. But I am keeping you anyway." She smelled like the lavender soap she preferred over the expensive products he kept buying her. Like coffee and morning and home. He closed his eyes and breathed her in, trying to memorize the moment, though he did not know why. Some instinct. Some premonition he could not name. "I have a community meeting this morning," she said, pulling back. "Budget discussions for the new shelter program. Take the car. Take the driver." She laughed. "Dominic, I am going 6 blocks. I will walk like a normal human being." Normal. That word again. She had a way of using it like a compass, always pointing back toward something real. He left for his office an hour later, kissing her goodbye at the door like he had done 1,000 mornings before. She was still in his shirt, still barefoot, still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I love you," she said, the words casual and profound at once. "I love you too." He had no way of knowing it would be the last morning that simple exchange would ever feel innocent. The envelope arrived at noon. Dominic was reviewing contracts in his corner office, the Manhattan skyline spread out behind him like a kingdom awaiting its king. His executive assistant, Margaret, knocked twice before entering, her expression uncomfortable in a way that made him look up immediately. Margaret had worked for him for 11 years. She had seen him fire board members without blinking, had watched him dismantle competitors with surgical precision, had witnessed him navigate crises that would have broken lesser men. She had never looked uncomfortable. "This came by courier," she said, "marked personal and confidential." She placed the envelope on his desk and retreated quickly, closing the door behind her. The envelope was plain white. No return address. Just his name typed in a standard font that offered no clues about its origin. He opened it without thinking, expecting perhaps some unsolicited business proposal or fan letter from an aspiring entrepreneur. Inside were photographs. Serena sitting in a coffee shop with a man Dominic did not recognize. The angle of the shot made it look like they were holding hands across the table, though the image was grainy enough to be ambiguous. Another photograph showed them walking together down a tree-lined street, the man's hands seemingly resting on her lower back in that intimate way lovers touch. A third caught them outside a hotel entrance, standing close, her hand on his chest, their faces inches apart. Dominic's hands began to shake. He set the photographs down carefully, as if they might explode, and read the accompanying note. It was typed, anonymous, printed on ordinary paper. "Your wife is not who you think she is. These meetings have been happening for months. I thought you deserved to know before the whole world finds out and your reputation is destroyed along with your marriage." His chest constricted. The air in his office seemed to thicken, to become something he had to fight to breathe. He told himself there had to be an explanation. Serena had never given him a single reason to doubt her. In 3 years of marriage, she had been nothing but honest, nothing but loving, nothing but completely devoted to building a life together. But the photographs sat on his desk like accusations. And his mind, that ruthless, analytical mind that had built a billion-dollar empire by identifying threats and neutralizing them, began constructing narratives he did not want to believe. He called Victor. Victor Hayes was his oldest friend. They had met in college, 2 ambitious young men from modest backgrounds determined to claw their way to the top. They had built their first company together in a cramped apartment, surviving on ramen and determination. When the company sold for $50 million, they had split the proceeds and parted ways professionally, but the friendship had remained. Victor came immediately. He always did. That was the thing about Victor. He was reliable. Steady. The kind of friend who showed up without being asked and never expected anything in return. Or so Dominic believed. Victor looked at the photographs spread across Dominic's desk. He studied each one carefully, his expression grave, before shaking his head slowly. I hate to say this, Dom, but I have seen this before. He sat down across from Dominic, leaning forward with the concerned intensity of a man delivering difficult news to a friend. My cousin went through the exact same thing. Beautiful woman, modest background, suddenly living in luxury. Everything seemed perfect until he found out she had been seeing someone else the entire time. Someone from her old life. Someone she claimed was just a friend. There could be an explanation, Dominic said, but his voice lacked conviction. Of course there could be. Victor's tone was carefully calibrated. Sympathetic but skeptical. But you need to ask yourself something, Dom. A woman from her background, suddenly with access to everything you have. No prenup protecting you. What if this whole marriage was strategic from the beginning? What if she has been playing you, and now she is lining up her exit strategy? Serena is not like that. Everyone says that. Right up until they find out the truth. The poison worked slowly. Dominic tried calling Serena, but she did not answer. She was in her community meeting, phone silenced like always, but his mind, infected now with suspicion, interpreted her silence as evasion. She was not answering because she had something to hide. She was not answering because she was with him. She was not answering because everything Victor suggested was true. More photographs arrived the next day. Delivered by courier, same plain envelope, same typed label. These showed Serena and the man at what appeared to be a restaurant, seated in a corner booth, their heads close together in conversation. There was a receipt tucked behind the photographs with a handwritten note at the bottom. Last night was perfect. The handwriting looked similar to Serena's, though Dominic could not be certain. Was it her writing? Was it a forgery? He stared at the loops and curves until his vision blurred, trying to determine truth from implication. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. He hired a private investigator, a man who came highly recommended for discretion. The investigator returned 3 days later with a preliminary report. The man in the photographs is Derek Okonkwo. He was a colleague of your wife at the crisis center before she left. They worked together for about 2 years. I could not confirm anything physical between them, but they have been meeting regularly. Coffee shops, restaurants, that hotel you saw in the photos. Always during your work hours. Always discreet. So there is an affair. The investigator hesitated. I cannot confirm that. What I can confirm is that she has been meeting this man without your knowledge. Without my knowledge. The words echoed. Without my knowledge. As if Serena had been living a double life. As if the woman who kissed him goodbye every morning was not the same woman spending her afternoons with another man. When Dominic finally confronted her, he had been awake for 40 hours. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands trembled with exhaustion and rage. He had marinated in betrayal until it had become the only flavor he could taste. Serena was reading in their bedroom, curled up in the chair by the window, the one she claimed caught the best afternoon light. She looked up when he entered, her expression shifting from welcome to concern when she saw his face. What happened? Are you okay? Who is he? His voice was cold. Foreign even to himself. The voice of a man who had already made up his mind and was simply going through the motions of confirmation. She set down her book slowly. Who is who? The man you have been meeting. Do not lie to me, Serena. I have photographs. He threw the envelope at her feet. It landed with a soft thud on the carpet, scattering images across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. Serena looked down at them, then bent slowly to pick them up. Her hands trembled as she shuffled through the photographs, her face draining of color with each image. When she looked back up at him, there were tears in her eyes. But not from guilt. From shock. From the bewildered devastation of someone who has just discovered the ground beneath their feet is not solid at all. Dominic, this is Derek. He is a counselor I have been working with on the new shelter program. These photographs are making it look like something it is not. Then why did you not tell me about him? I did tell you. She stood now, the photographs crumpling in her grip. I have mentioned Derek at least a dozen times. We are coordinating the expansion together. But you never ask about my work, Dominic. You smile and nod and then go back to your phone. You have never once asked for details. The accuracy of that observation should have stopped him. He did tune out when she talked about work. He did smile and nod while thinking about other things. He had been so focused on his own empire that he had treated her passion like background noise. But pride, that ancient poison, it was already coursing through his veins. So it is my fault you have been sneaking around. I have not been sneaking around. Her voice cracked with frustration. We have professional meetings about professional projects. In public places. With other colleagues present most of the time. These photos are cropped to look intimate. They are lies, Dominic. Then explain the hotel. What hotel? He grabbed one of the photographs from her hand, jabbed his finger at the image of her and Derek standing outside what was clearly a hotel entrance. This hotel. Why were you there? Serena looked at the photograph, and for a moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then recognition. That is not a hotel. That is the Riverside Community Center. They renovated an old hotel building into a community space. We had a meeting there about the shelter program. With 6 other people. Convenient. The word hung in the air like a slap. Serena stared at him, and he watched something change in her eyes. Something shift from desperation to defend herself toward something harder. Something that looked a lot like the first stages of giving up. You have already decided, she said quietly. You have already made up your mind. I am trying to understand. No. You are trying to confirm what you have already chosen to believe. She took a step back from him, physically creating distance. Dominic, look at me. Really look at me. You know me. You have known me for 3 years. I have never lied to you. I have never given you any reason to doubt me. And now, because of some anonymous photographs, you are willing to throw away everything we built. The photographs are not anonymous. Someone sent them because they thought I deserved to know. And who is this someone? Have you asked yourself that? Who would want you to believe the worst about me? Who benefits from destroying our marriage? The question should have made him pause. Should have made him think critically about who might have motive, who might want to plant seeds of doubt in his mind. But he was too far gone now. The poison had spread to every part of his rational brain. Maybe someone who cares about me more than you do. Serena flinched like he had struck her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The afternoon light that she loved so much was fading now, shadows creeping across the floor, darkness slowly claiming the room. Then she did something he did not expect. She laughed. Not a joyful laugh. Not even a bitter one. It was the laugh of someone who has just realized a horrible truth they had been trying to ignore. Your lawyers called me expensive, she said. Did you know that? When we were negotiating the marriage, before I refused to sign the prenup, I overheard them talking. They said I was expensive, and that you should be careful because women like me always want more. Serena. I thought it was funny at the time. I thought you would never see me that way. But that is exactly how you see me now, is it not? Expensive. A liability. A woman from my background suddenly living in luxury. She was quoting Victor. Words Dominic had spoken to no one. Which meant Victor had said them to her. Which meant... His mind tried to make the connection, tried to see the pattern forming right in front of his eyes, but the exhaustion and the certainty and the pride all conspired to blind him. I want you out by Friday, he said. His voice hollow, empty. The voice of a man who has already destroyed everything and does not yet know it. My lawyers will be in touch about the settlement. Do not make this difficult. Difficult. She laughed again, and this time there was an edge to it that cut through the air. You are throwing away our marriage based on anonymous photographs and paranoid accusations, and you are asking me not to make this difficult. Friday, Serena. She stared at him for a long moment. And then, slowly, she nodded. Fine. If that is what you want. She walked past him toward the closet, pulling out a small suitcase she had brought when she first moved in. The same suitcase she had arrived with 3 years ago, when this penthouse was just a building and she was just a woman in a $12 dress who asked him what it felt like to see his own face on the side of buildings. But she stopped at the door. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "Not because I am going to fight you or make your life miserable, but because one day you are going to realize you were wrong. And when that day comes, you will have to live with what you destroyed." Then she was gone. And Dominic stood alone in their bedroom, surrounded by photographs of lies he believed and truths he ignored, and told himself he had done the right thing. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Dominic had resources, connections, lawyers who could make things appear or disappear as needed. Serena had her dignity and the truth, neither of which held much weight in legal warfare against a billionaire determined to protect his wounded ego. She did not fight him on the settlement, did not demand half of everything, as his lawyers had warned she would. She asked only for what she had brought into the marriage, which was almost nothing, and the right to walk away with her reputation intact. Even that, Dominic could not give her. The story leaked to the press somehow. Billionaire CEO divorces wife amid cheating allegations. The headlines were everywhere, painting Serena as a gold digger who had been caught in an affair, even though no evidence of any affair ever surfaced. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. She tried to reason with him one final time. She appeared at his office unannounced, past security, past Margaret, past all the barriers he had erected between himself and the world. She stood in his doorway looking smaller than he remembered, wearing a simple dress, no makeup, her eyes red from crying or sleeplessness or both. "Dominic, please. Just 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you. Then just listen." She moved into his office, closing the door behind her, and for a moment she just stood there, looking around at the space where he spent more hours than he had ever spent with her. "I love you," she said. "I have only ever loved you. I do not know who sent those photographs or why they are trying to destroy us. But I swear on everything sacred, I swear on my grandmother's grave, I have never been unfaithful to you. Not in action. Not in thought. Not even in the smallest moment of temptation." He looked at her, and for one brief moment, he saw his wife. The woman who bought $12 vases from street vendors. The woman who laughed with her whole body. The woman who had made his mausoleum feel like a home. But then Victor's voice echoed in his head. Women from her background, suddenly living in luxury. And the moment passed. "I want you out by Friday," he repeated. "And this time, do not come back." She did not come back. But that night, as Dominic sat alone in a penthouse that suddenly felt like a tomb, something happened that he would not fully understand until 9 years later. Serena returned. Not to beg. Not to argue. Not to fight for what was already lost. She returned to tell him the truth. Or at least to try. He heard the elevator arrive. Heard her footsteps on the marble floor. And when he turned, she was standing in the doorway of their bedroom, wearing the same dress she had worn the night they met at the charity gala. Simple. Elegant. Worth less than his watch and infinitely more beautiful than anything his money could buy. "I came to tell you something," she said. Her voice was steady now. Not pleading. Not desperate. Just honest. Not to change your mind, because clearly your mind is made of stone now, but because you deserve to know what you are throwing away. "I do not want to hear it. I am not going to fight you anymore. I am not going to beg. I am leaving you and your penthouse and your suspicion and your pride. But I want you to know something." She paused, and he could see her struggling with words she had rehearsed but still found difficult to speak. "Years from now, when you finally discover you were wrong, when you finally learn that there was never anyone else, you will have to live with what you destroyed. And Dominic, that destruction is going to be so much bigger than you can possibly imagine right now." He did not understand what she meant. Did not see the way her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, the way she cradled something invisible, something precious. "Is that a threat?" "No. It is a prophecy." She moved into the room, stopping a few feet away from him, and slowly, deliberately, she removed her wedding ring. The diamond caught the light as she held it up between them. $50,000 worth of stone and metal that suddenly seemed worthless. She set it on the marble floor. The sound it made when it landed was small. A tiny click that echoed through the cavernous space like a death knell. "Goodbye, Dominic." She turned and walked away. He stood frozen, listening to her footsteps retreat down the hallway. He heard the elevator arrive. Heard the doors open. Heard them close. And still he did not move. He walked to the window instead and watched from 40 stories up as she emerged onto the street far below. She was walking away in bare feet because she had left her heels behind. One hand pressed against her stomach in a gesture he did not understand. Behind her, his penthouse blazed with lights. Ahead of her, only darkness. And in that moment, Dominic Ashford, who had built an empire on calculated decisions and strategic risk assessment, realized too late that the only decision that truly mattered was the one he had just failed. But what he did not see, what he could not possibly know, was that Serena was walking away carrying more than her broken heart. She was carrying 2 pieces of him that would grow into the only second chance he would ever get. The women's shelter smelled like industrial cleaning solution and quiet desperation. Serena sat on a narrow cot in a room shared with 3 other women, her small bag containing everything she owned. 2 changes of clothes. Her expired counselor certification. $47 in cash. And the pregnancy test she had taken in a gas station bathroom that morning. 2 pink lines. 2 lives depending on her. 2 reasons she could not fall apart. She stared at the test for a long time, as if willing the lines to change, to reveal themselves as a mistake, a false positive, anything other than what they were. But they remained. 2 pink lines that meant everything had changed. First time. The woman on the next cot was speaking. Older, with kind eyes and hands that spoke of hard labor and survival. Her name was Dorothy, and she had been in and out of shelters for years, fleeing one bad situation only to find herself in another. Serena looked up. First time being homeless. First time being underestimated. Dorothy nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly what that meant. The difference is, homeless can be fixed. Underestimated just makes you stronger. She was right. Serena would come to understand that in the months ahead. Every obstacle, every indignity, every moment of wondering if she would survive until tomorrow would make her stronger. Would forge her into something unbreakable. But in that moment, sitting on a narrow cot in a room that smelled like despair, she did not feel strong. She felt terrified. How was she supposed to raise a child? How was she supposed to raise 2 children, because she knew somehow, even before the ultrasound confirmed it, that she was carrying twins? She knew because that was exactly the kind of cosmic joke the universe would play on her. Leave you with nothing and then double the stakes. She could go back. The thought surfaced unbidden, unwanted. She could call Dominic. Tell him about the pregnancy. He would take her back. Not out of love, but out of obligation. He would install her in some wing of the penthouse, provide for the children, give them every material advantage. And she would spend the rest of her life watching him look at her with suspicion. Watching him wonder if the children were really his. Watching him teach them, through his doubt and his distance, that love was conditional and trust was foolish. No. She said the word out loud, and Dorothy looked over at her. No, Serena repeated, quieter now. I am not going back. Good girl. Dorothy smiled, and it was the first genuine warmth Serena had felt since walking out of the penthouse. Whatever you are running from, it is not worth returning to. I learned that the hard way. 3 times. You seem smarter than me. Learn it once and be done. Serena learned. The shelter had a 2-month limit on stays. After that, residents were expected to have found alternative housing, alternative employment, alternative lives. The system was designed to provide temporary relief, not permanent solutions. She found work at a commercial laundry facility within the first week. 12-hour shifts folding sheets and towels, standing in front of industrial machines that steamed and roared and turned fabric into something useful. The work was brutal. Her back ached constantly. Her feet swelled until her shoes did not fit. And her body, that treacherous vessel, kept growing with pregnancy while she tried to hide it beneath oversized shirts. The other workers noticed anyway. They were mostly immigrant women with their own survival stories, women who understood what it meant to be alone in the world with nothing but determination. They did not ask questions, did not demand explanations. They simply closed ranks around her with quiet solidarity. Extra food appeared on her break table. Someone's cousin knew a landlord renting a room cheap. A woman named Maria covered her shifts when morning sickness made standing impossible. "You are having the baby," Maria said one afternoon. It was not a question. "Babies," Serena corrected. "Twins." Maria's eyes widened slightly, but she did not comment on the impossibility of the situation. She just nodded and said, "My mother raised 6 of us alone. It can be done." Serena held on to those words like a lifeline. It can be done. It would have to be. The ultrasound technician at the free clinic was young, probably fresh out of training, with a cheerful demeanor that felt jarring in the context of sterile rooms and uncertain futures. Serena lay on the examination table, her belly exposed, watching the grainy images on the monitor as the technician moved the wand across her skin. "Okay, let us see what we have here." The image shifted and swirled, black and white shapes that meant nothing to Serena until suddenly they meant everything. 2 heartbeats. She could hear them through the speakers, rapid and distinct, 2 separate rhythms pulsing in tandem. "There is baby A," the technician said, pointing to a small form on the screen. "And there is baby B. Both looking healthy, good position, good development." The technician smiled at Serena like this was happy news, like discovering you were carrying twins while homeless and alone was cause for celebration. "Do you want to know the genders?" Serena nodded, unable to speak. "Both boys." "Congratulations." "Boys." "2 sons." She left the clinic in a daze, walking through streets she barely recognized, her hands pressed against her belly where Dominic's children grew. His sons. Boys who would have his eyes and his stubborn jaw and maybe, if she was lucky, her capacity for love instead of his capacity for doubt. She should have felt anger. Should have felt the urge to call him, to demand he face the consequences of his accusations. To force him to acknowledge that he was throwing away not just a wife but a family. But what she felt instead was a fierce, primal protective love that left no room for anger. These boys were hers now. Hers alone. And she would protect them from everything. Including their father. That night, in the tiny room she was renting from Maria's cousin, she spoke to them for the first time. "I am going to name you Julian and Sebastian," she whispered, her hands on her belly. "Strong names. Survivor names. And I promise you, I will give you everything I have. I will work until my hands bleed. I will sacrifice anything. But you will never know what it feels like to be unwanted. You will never doubt that you are loved." The babies kicked in response, 2 separate movements, 2 separate lives affirming that they heard her, that they believed her. It was the first of many promises she would keep. The birth was the loneliest experience of her life. Maria drove her to the county hospital when the contractions started, holding her hand through the worst of the pain until the nurses wheeled her away. "You are strong," Maria said before the doors closed between them. "You are stronger than you know." Serena did not feel strong. She felt terrified and alone, gripping the bed rails as her body tore itself apart, bringing life into the world. There was no partner holding her hand. No family in the waiting room. Just her and 2 babies fighting their way into existence. Julian arrived first, screaming his displeasure at the bright lights and the cold air and the general indignity of being born. He was small but fierce, his cries filling the delivery room with unmistakable outrage. Sebastian followed 3 minutes later, quieter than his brother. His dark eyes seemed to observe everything with solemn intensity, as if he was already taking notes on this strange new world he had entered. The nurse placed them both on Serena's chest, and she felt something shift inside her. Something permanent. Something unbreakable. These were her sons. Her boys. Her everything. "Congratulations, Mama," the nurse said, smiling down at her. 2 beautiful boys. Serena looked at their faces. Julian's scrunched with the effort of crying. Sebastian's calm and watchful. And she saw Dominic in both of them. the shape of his jaw, the color of his eyes, the set of his brows. For a moment, grief threatened to overwhelm her. Grief for what could have been. For the family they should have built together. For the father her sons would never know. But she pushed it down, buried it deep, and spoke the words that would define the next 9 years of their lives. "I will never let anyone hurt you," she whispered. "Not even him. If you are still with me, I need you to do something. Drop a comment below and tell me this. What would you do if you discovered you had children you never knew existed? Would you run toward them, or away from your own guilt? Would you fight for them, or convince yourself they were better off without you? Keep watching, because this story is far from over. The years that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless forward motion. Serena found an apartment in a neighborhood where sirens sometimes interrupted the boys' sleep. It was small. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for a table, windows that rattled when trucks drove past. But it was theirs. The first space that belonged to them alone. She went back to school. It seemed impossible at first. Online classes while the twins slept, typing papers with one hand while feeding them with the other, reading textbooks during their naps, taking exams while they played at her feet. She survived on coffee and determination and the absolute refusal to fail. She earned her degree in social work 3 years after leaving the penthouse. The boys were toddlers by then, walking and talking and discovering the world with the boundless curiosity of children who do not yet know that curiosity has limits. Julian took apart everything he could get his hands on. Remote controls, toys, once the lock on the apartment door, which had resulted in a very expensive visit from a locksmith. He wanted to know how things worked. Needed to understand the mechanics of existence. Sebastian was different. He watched people instead of objects. Studied faces and expressions and the subtle shifts in tone that most adults missed. He was eerily perceptive, often asking questions that made Serena wonder if he could read minds. "Why does the lady at the store look so sad, Mama? Why did that man yell at his phone? Why do you cry sometimes when you think we are asleep?" That last question had nearly broken her. "Because I remember something that made me sad," she had answered carefully. "But you too make me happy. So the crying does not last long." Sebastian had studied her face with those dark, thoughtful eyes. "Is the sad thing about our father." It was the first time either of them had mentioned their father directly. She had told them, in vague terms, that their father lived far away and could not be with them. That he did not know about them. That it was complicated. Yes, she admitted. Some of the sad is about him. "Do you think he would be sad too, if he knew about us?" The question hit her harder than she expected. Would Dominic be sad? Would he care? Or would he look at the boys with the same suspicion he had looked at her, wondering if they were really his, waiting for proof of betrayal? "I think," she said slowly, "that he would not know what to feel. Some people are not good at feelings. But we are good at feelings. Yes. We are very good at feelings." Sebastian had nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to his drawing. But Serena had lain awake that night, wondering if she was doing the right thing. Wondering if her silence was protection or punishment. Wondering if she had the right to keep Dominic from his sons, even if he had thrown her away. The wondering never stopped. But neither did the silence. She told them a fairy tale at bedtime. A story she crafted carefully over the years, adjusting it as they grew, adding complexity to match their understanding. Once upon a time, there was a king who ruled over a great kingdom. He was powerful and wealthy, but he was also lonely, because being powerful often means being alone. One day, the king met a woman from a small village. She was not rich or important, but she was kind and wise, and she made the king laugh in ways he had forgotten he could. He fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him, and for a while they were very happy. But a wicked sorcerer lived in the kingdom. He was jealous of the king's happiness, because he wanted the woman for himself. So he created an illusion. Magic images that made it look like the woman had betrayed the king with another man. The king believed the illusion. He believed it because he was afraid. Afraid of losing the woman. Afraid of being fooled. And his fear turned into anger, and his anger made him send the woman away. She left the castle with a broken heart. But she carried with her a secret. 2 precious gifts that the king did not know existed. 2 princes who would grow up never knowing their father. Julian always interrupted at this point. That is stupid. Why would the king believe the sorcerer instead of the woman? Because fear is very powerful, Serena would explain. It makes smart people do stupid things. It makes kind people act cruel. The king was not evil. He was scared. And scared people make mistakes. What happened to the sorcerer? Serena always paused at this part, because the truth was she did not know. Victor had disappeared from Dominic's life after the divorce. She had heard rumors that their friendship had ended, that something had happened between them, but she did not know what. The sorcerer got what he deserved, she would say. The universe has a way of punishing people who cause pain. And the king, Sebastian would ask, his voice soft. Did he ever find out about the princes? The king lived in his castle alone, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. Did he? Julian pressed. Did he make a mistake? Yes. The biggest mistake of his life. Sebastian would look at her with those old soul eyes. Will he ever know? About us. About the princes. And Serena would pause. Would feel the weight of the secret pressing against her chest. Would wonder, as she did every night, if she was doing the right thing. I do not know, she would finally say. That part of the story has not been written yet. 9 years passed this way. Serena built a life from nothing. Worked her way up from caseworker to supervisor to program director at a crisis center larger than the one where she had met Dominic. She bought a small house in a modest neighborhood, with a backyard where the boys could play and bedrooms where they could dream. Julian thrived in school. His mind worked in patterns and calculations, solving problems his teachers had not even asked yet. He was in advanced classes by age 7, talking about computers and engineering and one day building things that would change the world. Sebastian wrote stories. Filled notebooks with tales of kings and queens and magic and loss. His teachers called him gifted. His mother called him her heart. They were good boys. Kind boys. The kind of boys who helped old ladies carry groceries and defended smaller kids from bullies. The kind of boys who made her proud every single day. And she had done it alone. Without Dominic's money. Without his help. Without his name or his influence or anything he could have provided. She had done it with $12 vases and discount groceries and working 3 jobs until her hands bled. She had done it with fierce love and stubborn determination and the absolute refusal to let her circumstances define her future. The boys asked about their father sometimes. Less often as they grew older, as if they sensed the pain the topic caused her. But occasionally, usually late at night, one of them would venture a question. Do you think he is happy? Julian asked once. The king in the story. Living alone in his castle. Serena considered the question carefully. I think, she said, that happiness is hard to find when you have pushed away everyone who matters. The king has everything in the world except the things that actually count. Like what? Like people to love. Like people who love you back. Like family. Julian was quiet for a moment. He does have family, though. He just does not know it. Yes. So maybe one day he will find out. And then maybe he will not be alone anymore. Serena had pulled her son close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his heart beat against her chest. Maybe. But first he would have to earn them. He would have to prove he is not the same man who believed the lie. And that takes time. How much time? As much time as it takes. She did not know then that time was running out. Did not know that somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that had become a prison, Dominic Ashford was drowning in regret. And she certainly did not know that in just a few short months, everything she had built would be threatened by a man from the past with a grudge that time had only sharpened. The night everything changed started like any other night. Serena was working late at the crisis center, reviewing case files, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed the boys' school, which was strange because school had been out for hours. Ms. Monroe, this is Principal Davis. Her married name had been Ashford, but she had reclaimed her maiden name after the divorce. A small act of erasure that felt necessary at the time. Is everything okay? I am not sure how to tell you this. The principal's voice was strange, tight, controlled in a way that meant something was very wrong. The boys were not on the bus this afternoon. We only just realized because there was a substitute driver who did not know their route. By the time we figured out what happened, her blood turned to ice. What do you mean they were not on the bus? Where are they? We do not know. We have contacted the police. They are sending someone to the school now. But Ms. Monroe, I have to tell you something else. There was a pause. A terrible, eternal pause. A man came to the school earlier today. Said he was an uncle, needed to pick them up early. The substitute in the front office did not know the protocol. She let them go. The phone slipped from Serena's fingers. The world tilted, blurred, became something unrecognizable. Her boys. Her babies. Gone. The next hours were a nightmare she would never fully remember. Police officers asking questions she could barely hear. Detectives showing her photographs of security footage, grainy images of a man she did not recognize leading her sons toward a black van. Do you know this man?
No.
Does he look familiar at all?
No.
I have never seen him before. The detective exchanged a glance with his partner. Ms. Monroe, is there anyone who might want to hurt you? Anyone who might have a grudge against you? A former partner, maybe. Someone who... The question trailed off as understanding dawned on his face. The boy's father. Who is he? And there it was. The secret she had kept for 9 years, finally demanding to be told. The ransom call came at midnight. Serena was sitting in her living room, surrounded by police equipment and sympathetic faces, when her phone rang from an unknown number. Put it on speaker, the lead detective instructed. She answered with trembling hands. Ms. Monroe. A voice she did not recognize. Electronic, distorted, impossible to identify. You have something I want. Please. Her voice broke immediately. Please do not hurt them. I will give you anything. Please. I do not want anything from you. You have nothing I need. Then why? Why take them? What do you want? I want him. The voice turned sharp. I want Dominic Ashford to know what it feels like to lose everything. And you are going to help me. The world stopped spinning. Dominic. This was about Dominic. Someone had taken her children not because of anything she had done, but because of who their father was. You have 48 hours, the voice continued. $50 million, delivered by Ashford himself. Alone. No police, no security, no tricks. If he sends anyone else, if you involve the authorities any further than you already have, I will make sure he never sees those boys alive. How do I know they are okay? How do I know you have not already? She could not finish the sentence. There was a pause. Then another voice came through the phone. Small. Frightened. The most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Mama. Sebastian's voice, trembling with fear but alive. Alive. I am here, baby. I am here. Mama, I am scared. Julian is here too. He is okay. We are okay. But the man says we cannot come home until... The voice cut off. The distorted one returned. 48 hours. 50 million. Ashford in person. Those are the terms. The line went dead. The detective was speaking, but Serena could not hear him. All she could hear was Sebastian's voice. Mama, I am scared. All she could see was 9 years of protecting her boys from everything, only to have them taken because of a man who did not even know they existed. She had to call him. The realization settled over her like a shroud. She had to call Dominic. Had to tell him about the sons he had never known. Had to beg for help from the man who had thrown her away. Ms. Monroe, the detective was saying, we need to discuss how to handle this. We have protocols for kidnapping situations. The FBI will be involved.
No.
She stood abruptly, cutting him off. No police. No FBI. You heard what he said. If we involve anyone else, my sons die. Ms. Monroe, I understand your fear, but statistics are not going to save my boys. She was shaking now, her whole body trembling with fury and terror. He wants Dominic Ashford. He wants money, and he wants Dominic there in person. That is what he is going to get. The detective started to argue, but she was already walking away, phone in hand, pulling up a number she had saved 9 years ago and never deleted. She had told herself she kept it for emergencies. This was the emergency she had never imagined. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and then a voice she had never forgotten answered. Hello. The Meridian Hotel was not the kind of place Dominic Ashford usually entered. Mid-range. Functional. The kind of establishment where traveling salesmen and budget-conscious families stayed when passing through the city. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and complimentary breakfast, and the night clerk barely looked up when Dominic pushed through the revolving door at 3:47 in the morning. Room 714. He took the elevator because the stairs would have been faster, but his legs were shaking too badly to trust them. 7 floors of terrible anticipation. 7 floors of trying to prepare himself for what waited on the other side of that door. Sons. He had sons. The words kept repeating in his mind like a broken record, refusing to become real no matter how many times he thought them. Twins. 8 years old. Taken by someone who wanted to hurt him. The elevator opened. The hallway stretched before him, identical doors on either side, numbers climbing toward the one that would change everything. 714. He stopped outside the door, raised his hand to knock. And for one terrible moment, he could not make himself do it. What was he supposed to say? How was he supposed to explain 9 years of absence to children who did not know he existed? How was he supposed to face Serena, the woman he had destroyed, and ask her to trust him with the lives of their sons? The door opened before he could knock. And there she was. 9 years had changed her. She was thinner than he remembered, harder around the edges, with lines of exhaustion carved around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible choices. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her clothes were simple, functional, nothing like the elegant woman who had once moved through his penthouse like she owned it. But she was still Serena. Still the most magnetic person he had ever encountered. Still capable of stopping his heart with a single glance. You came. Her voice was flat, empty of the warmth that had once made his cold world feel habitable. But beneath that emptiness, he could hear something else. Relief, maybe. Or the exhaustion of a woman who had been fighting alone for too long. Of course I came. She studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face for something he could not identify. Then she stepped aside. Come in. And keep your voice down. The room was small. 2 beds, a desk, a window with a view of the parking lot. And sitting on the edge of one bed, watching him with identical expressions of wary curiosity, were 2 boys. His boys. The resemblance was immediate and undeniable. They had his bone structure, his eyes, even the way they held themselves, straight-backed and watchful, assessing the stranger who had burst into their lives in the middle of the night. One of them, the one with the harder expression and the clenched jaw, spoke first. So you are the billionaire. Julian, Serena said quietly. A warning. What? The boy did not look away from Dominic. That is what he is, right? The rich guy who did not know we existed. The one who threw Mom away and never looked back. Each word was a blade, and Dominic felt every cut. Yes. He forced the word out. That is what I am. The other boy, the quieter one with the thoughtful eyes, tilted his head slightly. You are the king from the story. The one who believed the lie. Dominic's breath caught. He looked at Serena, questions flooding his mind, but she just shook her head slightly. Not now. Yes. He turned back to his sons. I am the king who made the worst mistake of his life. Julian stood abruptly, his small hands clenched into fists. If you are so rich, why did we grow up poor? Why did Mom have to work 3 jobs? Why did we live in an apartment where the heat did not work half the time while you were sitting in your castle doing nothing? Julian. Serena's voice was sharper now. That is enough. No, it is not enough. The boy was crying now, angry tears streaming down his face. He left us. He left you. And now he shows up in the middle of the night like some kind of hero and we are supposed to just— I did not know. Dominic's voice cracked on the words, and something in his tone made Julian stop mid-sentence. I did not know you existed. Your mother never told me she was pregnant. I found out 2 hours ago when she called me. If I had known, if I had any idea. He could not finish. The words dissolved into something that was not quite a sob but was close enough to make both boys stare at him with wide eyes. The silence stretched. Then Sebastian, the quiet one, spoke again. Mom said you chose fear instead of love. That you believed lies instead of trusting her. Is that true? Dominic looked at his younger son, seeing in those dark, thoughtful eyes an intelligence that went beyond his years. Yes. That is true. I was afraid of losing her, so I pushed her away before she could leave me. It was cowardly and cruel and I have regretted it every day since. But you never came looking for us. I did not know there was a you to look for. Did you look for her? The question hung in the air. Dominic thought about the investigators he had hired. The dead ends. The years of searching that had yielded nothing. He thought about the letters he had written in the first 2 years, desperate attempts to find her and explain and apologize, all of them returned or unanswered. Yes. 4 years. I could not find her. Sebastian nodded slowly, processing this information with that solemn intensity. Julian was still standing, still rigid with anger, but something had shifted in his expression. The fury was still there, but it was mixed now with something else. Confusion, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding. None of this matters right now, Serena said, breaking the silence. She moved to stand between Dominic and the boys, not quite protecting them from him but making her position clear. We can sort out the history later. Right now, I need you to understand what we are dealing with. Tell me everything. The story came out in fragments, Serena pacing the small room while the boys sat silent on the bed. 6 months ago, someone started watching them, following them, taking photographs at school, at the park, outside their apartment. At first, Serena thought she was being paranoid. Single mothers learn to be careful, especially ones who had escaped difficult situations. But the feeling persisted. Then the photographs started arriving. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. The boys at their school. The boys on the playground. The boys walking home, unaware that they were being watched. I went to the police. They said there was nothing they could do. No threats had been made. Taking pictures in public is not illegal. They told me to be careful and report anything suspicious. But you knew something was wrong. I knew someone was watching my sons. That was enough. 3 days ago, the watching had turned into action. The boys had been taken from school. A man claiming to be their uncle, showing identification that looked legitimate, speaking with authority that convinced an inexperienced substitute in the front office. By the time the school realized what had happened, Julian and Sebastian were gone. Serena's voice cracked as she described the hours that followed. The police investigation. The ransom call. The demands. They want $50 million, she said. Delivered by you. In person. Alone. That is not a problem. The money means nothing. It is not about the money. She stopped pacing, turning to face him directly. They do not just want to be paid. They want you to suffer. The voice on the phone, whoever they are, they said they want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. Dominic's blood ran cold. Who would? But even as he asked the question, he already knew the answer. There was only one person who had ever wanted to destroy him that badly. Only one person who knew about Serena, about their history, about the vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Victor. The name escaped his lips before he could stop it. Serena's eyes widened. Victor Hayes. Your business partner. Former business partner. I destroyed him 6 months after our divorce, when I found out he was the one who sent the photographs. What photographs? Dominic stared at her. You do not know. Know what? He sank onto the edge of the desk, suddenly exhausted. The photographs of you with Derek. The ones that convinced me you were having an affair. Victor sent them. He had someone follow you for weeks, taking pictures that could be manipulated to look incriminating. He forged the hotel receipt. He whispered in my ear about women from poor backgrounds and strategic marriages. Serena's face went white. Victor did that. He was in love with you. From the moment he saw you at the gala. When you chose me instead, he decided that if he could not have you, he would make sure I could not either. And you believed him. I believed him because I was afraid. Because he knew exactly which buttons to push. Because I was too proud and too stupid to trust the woman I loved more than my own paranoid insecurities. Serena was silent for a long moment. The boys watched the exchange with wide eyes, absorbing information they had never known, pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. So this is his revenge, Serena finally said. Victor. He lost everything because you destroyed him. And now he wants to destroy you the same way. By taking the only things that matter. Yes. Dominic looked at his sons. These two boys he had never held, never taught to ride bikes, never read bedtime stories to. These two boys who were the only good thing to come from the wreckage of his marriage. But I am not going to let that happen. The plan came together over the next hour. Serena had not been idle in the 3 days since the kidnapping. Despite the ransom demand, despite the threats about involving police, she had been investigating. Tracking. Using every skill she had developed in a decade of crisis counseling and the network of contacts she had built among women who had escaped dangerous situations. She knew where the kidnappers were operating from. A warehouse in the industrial district. I have a contact in the crisis network whose sister works security for the Port Authority. She was able to pull satellite footage and cross-reference it with the van from the school security cameras. How many men? For that we know of. Professionals, but not military. Criminals for hire who were contracted by someone with deep pockets and a specific target. Victor. Almost certainly. Dominic studied the photographs she had spread across the desk. Grainy images of a warehouse, a van, men moving in and out with the casual confidence of people who believed they were untouchable. So we know where they are. We know who hired them. What is the plan? Serena hesitated. The ransom demand was for you to deliver the money alone. If you show up with security, with police, with anyone who might spook them, they will kill the boys and disappear. Then I go alone. No. She said it firmly, and there was something in her voice that made him stop. You go alone. You are walking into a trap. Victor does not just want money. He wants you. He wants to look you in the eyes while he takes everything from you. If you walk into that warehouse alone with $50 million, you are giving him exactly what he wants. Then what do you suggest? Serena met his eyes, and for the first time since he had arrived, he saw something there besides anger and exhaustion. He saw calculation. Strategy. The fierce intelligence of a woman who had survived 9 years on her own and had no intention of being a victim ever again. I suggest you do something you have never done in your life, Dominic Ashford. I suggest you trust me. The warehouse loomed against the night sky like a monument to decay. Industrial. Abandoned. The kind of place where shadows gathered and screams went unheard. Dominic pulled his car to a stop outside the main entrance, cutting the engine and sitting in the silence for a long moment. $50 million in bearer bonds sat in the briefcase on the passenger seat. Untraceable. Exactly as demanded. He was about to walk into a trap. He knew it was a trap. That was the plan. The earpiece in his left ear crackled to life. You are in position. Serena's voice, calm and controlled despite everything. Yes. Remember what we discussed. Keep him talking. Get him to admit as much as possible. And Dominic. She paused. Do not do anything heroic. The boys need you alive. He did not respond. Could not respond. Because the truth was, he did not care about his own survival. The only thing that mattered was getting his sons out of that warehouse. If that meant sacrificing himself, so be it. He grabbed the briefcase and stepped out of the car. The warehouse door was unlocked. It swung open with a groan of rusted hinges, revealing a cavernous space lit by industrial floodlights. Crates and debris were scattered across the concrete floor. And standing in the center, flanked by 2 armed men, was Victor Hayes. 9 years had not been kind to him. He looked older, harder. The expensive suits and confident smile were gone, replaced by worn clothes and an expression carved from bitterness and rage. His hair had gone gray. His skin had the sallow quality of someone who had stopped caring about appearances long ago. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, calculating, filled with the same cold intelligence that had once made him Dominic's most trusted advisor. "You actually came." Victor's voice echoed through the empty space. "I was not sure you cared enough. About a woman you threw away. About children you never knew existed. But here you are. The mighty Dominic Ashford, reduced to playing delivery boy. Where are my sons? Your sons." Victor laughed, and the sound was ugly. "They are safe. For now. Whether they stay that way depends entirely on you." He gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet and held it up. On the screen, Julian and Sebastian sat in what looked like a storage room, bound but unharmed. Julian's face was set in defiance. Sebastian looked terrified. Dominic's hands clenched. "Let them go. You have what you want. Take the money and disappear." "The money." Victor waved his hand dismissively. "The money is nothing. A transaction. What I want is not something that can be purchased." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to understand." Victor moved closer, his guards keeping their weapons trained on Dominic. "I want you to understand what you took from me. Everything I had, everything I built, you destroyed because I dared to love the same woman you did. You destroyed my marriage. I showed you the truth about the woman you married." Dominic's voice went cold. "You fabricated lies, manipulated photographs, convinced me that the best person I ever knew was deceiving me. And I was stupid enough to believe you." Victor's smile twisted. "You were stupid enough to believe anything that confirmed your own fears. I just gave you permission to do what you were already inclined to do. Push away anyone who got too close. Trust suspicion over love. You did the destroying, Dominic. I just handed you the match. And those boys." Dominic's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. "2 children who have nothing to do with what happened between us. You would hurt them to punish me. They have everything to do with it." Victor's composure cracked, revealing the raw hatred beneath. "They are your legacy. Your continuation. 2 more Ashfords to carry on the family name while I have nothing. No family. No fortune. No future. You made sure of that. You made sure of that yourself when you chose revenge over integrity." Victor laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Only madness. "Integrity. You want to lecture me about integrity? You threw away the only woman who ever truly loved you because of photographs taken from misleading angles. You did not even bother to investigate. Did not ask questions. Just believed the worst because believing the worst was easier than trusting." The accuracy of that observation cut deeper than Dominic expected. "You are right." His voice was quiet. "Broken. I was a coward. I chose fear over love because I was terrified of being hurt. And that cowardice cost me everything worth having." Victor stared at him, thrown off balance by the admission. "But I lost 9 years with my sons because I was too afraid to trust their mother. I lost the woman I loved because I let a poisonous snake whisper lies in my ear. And I spent every single day since then regretting the choice I made." Dominic took a step forward, and the guards raised their weapons. "But here is the difference between us, Victor. I know I was wrong. I have spent 9 years drowning in regret, haunted by what I destroyed. You have spent 9 years convincing yourself that everything you did was justified. That you were the victim in a story where you deliberately caused harm. I was the victim. You destroyed me. You destroyed yourself. I just made you face the consequences." Victor's face contorted with rage. "Consequences. You want to talk about consequences? He pulled a gun from his waistband, pointing it directly at Dominic's chest. Here are the consequences. Your money, your sons, and then your life. That is what this ends with. Not forgiveness. Not redemption. Just an empty warehouse and a billionaire who finally understands what it feels like to lose everything. Dominic did not move. He should have been afraid. The barrel of a gun was pointed at his heart, and there was genuine murder in Victor's eyes. But all he could think about was the tablet screen. His sons. Julian's defiant expression. Sebastian's terror. If you kill me, the boys die anyway. You need me alive to collect the ransom. I do not need the ransom anymore. Victor's voice had gone eerily calm. I needed you here. I needed you to understand. And now that you do, the rest is just closure. His finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot came from behind him. Victor stumbled forward, the gun falling from his grip, his face contorting in shock and pain as he clutched his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. Serena stepped out of the shadows. She was holding a weapon with steady hands, her expression carved from ice, her eyes fixed on the man who had orchestrated the destruction of her marriage and the kidnapping of her children. You should have stayed destroyed, Victor. Behind her, figures emerged from the darkness. A woman Dominic did not recognize. A man who moved with the practiced efficiency of law enforcement. Serena's network. Her contacts. The plan she had trusted him not to interfere with. Victor's guards hesitated, their weapons uncertain, their loyalty clearly conditional on payment that was no longer coming. Drop them. The man behind Serena spoke with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Former police, Dominic realized. One of Serena's contacts from her crisis work. The guards complied. In the chaos that followed, as Victor was subdued and restrained, as the warehouse filled with people securing the scene and calling for actual police backup, Dominic could only stare at Serena. She had planned this. All of it. The ransom demand. His arrival. The confrontation. She had known exactly how it would unfold, and she had positioned herself to end it on her terms. You were never going to let me walk in here alone. His voice was hoarse. No. She lowered her weapon finally, and for the first time, he saw the exhaustion beneath her composure. I needed him focused on you. Gloating. Distracted. Otherwise, he would have noticed my people moving into position. You could have told me. You needed to be genuinely afraid. Victor knows you too well. If you had been performing, he would have sensed it. Dominic processed this. So you used me as bait. I used you as a distraction. There is a difference. Despite everything, despite the terror and the tension and the gun that had been pointed at his chest, Dominic felt something he had not felt in 9 years. Admiration. Where did you learn to shoot like that? I have spent 9 years helping women escape dangerous situations. Some of those situations required more than paperwork. Before he could respond, there was movement at the far end of the warehouse. A door opening. Voices. And then, running toward them with the desperate speed of children who had been terrified and were now free, Julian and Sebastian. Julian reached her first, throwing himself into her arms with such force that she staggered. Sebastian followed a moment later, and then all three of them were crying, holding each other, a family reunited in the wreckage of a plan that had failed. Dominic stood apart. He wanted to move toward them, wanted to hold his sons, to feel their heartbeats, to know that they were real and alive and safe. But he did not know if he had that right. Did not know if his presence would be welcome in their circle. Julian looked up first. His eyes, red from crying, fixed on Dominic with an expression that was difficult to read. You came for us. Of course I did. Even though you did not know us. Dominic's voice cracked. I knew you the moment I heard you existed. And I would have walked through fire to get you back. Julian studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extracted himself from Serena's arms and walked toward Dominic. The distance between them felt infinite. Years of absence. A lifetime of missed moments. The weight of choices made and unmade. Julian stopped in front of him. You were going to let him shoot you. It was not a question. Yes. Why? Because your life is worth more than mine. The boy's expression shifted. Something hard melting into something complicated. Mom said you chose fear instead of love. That you pushed her away because you were scared. That is true. But you were not scared tonight. You walked into that warehouse knowing you might die. Dominic crouched down so that he was at eye level with his son. I was terrified tonight. But being scared does not mean you get to run away. Sometimes being scared means you have to run toward the thing that frightens you because the alternative is losing everything that matters. Julian considered this. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Dominic's neck. The embrace was awkward, uncertain. The hug of a child who did not quite know how to love a stranger but was willing to try. Dominic closed his eyes and held his son. His son. The words finally became real. When he looked up, Sebastian was watching from Serena's side. You were very brave, Sebastian said quietly. Coming here. Not knowing if you would survive. I had to. Because of us. Because of both of you. Yes. Sebastian nodded slowly. In the story Mom tells us, the king spends years alone in his castle, wondering if he made a terrible mistake. He never finds out about the princes. Never gets a chance to make things right. Dominic swallowed hard. This is not a fairy tale. No. This is real. Which means the ending can be different. Sebastian hesitated. Then he crossed the distance between them and joined his brother, wrapping his arms around both of them, turning the embrace into something new. 3 people. 2 of whom had just met their father. 1 of whom had just discovered he had a reason to live. Serena watched from a few feet away. Her expression was unreadable. The same controlled mask she had worn since he had arrived at the hotel. But in her eyes, Dominic saw something that made his heart ache with hope. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the possibility of it. The aftermath was handled with the kind of efficiency that comes from proper planning. Police arrived. Statements were taken. Victor was arrested on charges of kidnapping, extortion, conspiracy, and attempted murder. His hired men turned on him immediately, offering testimony in exchange for reduced sentences. The evidence was overwhelming. Victor Hayes would never see freedom again. Dominic gave his statement in a daze, still processing everything that had happened. His lawyers arrived, but he sent them away. This was not a situation that required legal maneuvering. This was a situation that required him to be present, to be a father, to finally show up for the family he had failed. The sun was rising by the time they left the police station. Serena stood on the steps, the boys flanking her, all 3 of them looking exhausted beyond measure. I should get them home, she said. They need sleep. Of course. Dominic hesitated. Would it be okay if I? He did not know how to finish the question. Did not know what he was asking for. Permission to see them again. Permission to be part of their lives. Permission to try to undo 9 years of damage. Serena studied him for a long moment. The boys need rest. So do I. But tomorrow, we can talk about what comes next. Tomorrow. One day at a time, Dominic. That is how this has to work. She turned to leave, the boys following, but Sebastian stopped and looked back. The word hit Dominic like a physical blow. A word he had never heard directed at him. A word he had never earned but was being offered anyway. Yes. In the story, the king spends years wondering if he made a mistake. But he never gets to find out. He never gets a second chance. That is true. But this is not a story. No. It is not. Sebastian nodded, that solemn wisdom in his eyes. Good. Because I want to know how it ends. Then he turned and followed his mother and brother down the steps, leaving Dominic standing alone in the morning light, watching his family walk away. But this time, it was different. This time, he knew they would come back. If this story is hitting different, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who knows what it means to make mistakes and wish desperately for the chance to undo them. The days that followed were an exercise in patience. Dominic wanted to rush. wanted to insert himself into their lives immediately, to make up for 9 years of absence with an avalanche of presents. He wanted to buy them everything, give them everything, prove through material generosity that he could be trusted. But Serena refused. "You do not get to buy forgiveness," she said when he offered to move them into his penthouse. "The boys do not need your money. They need to know who you are. Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to prove myself. Start small. Show up consistently. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with presence. With attention. With the kind of love that does not require a credit card." It was the hardest thing Dominic had ever done. He rented an apartment near Serena's house. A modest 2-bedroom that his real estate colleagues would have laughed at. He learned their routines. School drop-offs. Soccer practices. Homework sessions. He was there. Every day. Not as the billionaire CEO. Not as the man who owned buildings with his face on them. But as a father. Trying desperately to make up for lost time. Trying to earn a place in the lives of 2 boys who had every reason to reject him. Julian warmed to him first. They shared a love of puzzles, of logic, of understanding how systems worked. Dominic taught him chess, and Julian beat him within 3 weeks. Legitimately. With no strategic surrendering. "You are smart," Dominic told him after the final checkmate. "Smarter than I was at your age. Mom says being smart is not as important as being kind. Your mother is the wisest person I have ever known." Julian studied him. "Do you still love her?" The question caught Dominic off guard. "I never stopped loving her. Even when I was too stupid and scared to show it. Even when I threw her away and spent 9 years regretting it. I have loved her every single day." "Then why did you believe the lies?" "Because I was afraid of losing her." And sometimes fear makes people do exactly the thing they are most afraid of. That is dumb. Yes. It is extremely dumb. Julian considered this. "But you are not scared anymore." "I am terrified," Dominic admitted. "Every day, I am terrified that I will mess this up. That I will say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing and lose you again. But you keep showing up anyway. That is what being brave means. Showing up even when you are scared." Julian nodded slowly. "Mom says the same thing. Like I said. Wisest person I have ever known." Sebastian was harder. He watched Dominic with those dark, thoughtful eyes, cataloging every interaction, weighing every word. The boy who had asked if he was the king from the story. The one who believed the lie. One evening, during one of their quiet sessions, Sebastian finally asked the question Dominic had been dreading. "Why did you believe them? The people who lied about Mom. Why did you believe them instead of her?" Dominic could have made excuses. Could have blamed Victor's manipulation, his own insecurities, the photographs that had been so deliberately misleading. But Sebastian deserved better than excuses. "Because I was afraid," he said honestly. "I loved your mother so much that I was terrified of losing her. And when someone told me I was about to lose her anyway, that fear turned into anger. I convinced myself that pushing her away was protecting myself. But really, I was just being a coward." "Are you still a coward?" "Sometimes. But I am trying not to be. Every single day, I am trying." Sebastian studied him for a long moment. "Mom says the king in the story spent years alone, wondering if he made a terrible mistake. But he never got a chance to find out. He never got to meet the princes." "That is true. But you are here. You found out. You came for us." "Yes." "And you were willing to die for us." "Yes." Sebastian nodded slowly. "Then maybe the story can have a different ending." He reached out and took Dominic's hand. The gesture was small, simple. But it meant more than all the money Dominic had ever accumulated. More than every building with his name on it. More than every deal he had ever closed. His son's hand in his. The beginning of something new. 6 months after the warehouse, Serena agreed to have dinner with him. Not with the boys. Just the 2 of them. The first time they had been truly alone since the night she had walked out of his penthouse 9 years ago. They went to a small Italian restaurant, nothing fancy, the kind of place where the owners knew their customers by name and the pasta was made fresh daily. You have been different, Serena observed over wine. With the boys. With everything. The Dominic I married would not have rented a modest apartment. Would not have learned to cook. Would not have shown up to every single parent-teacher conference. The Dominic you married was an arrogant fool who did not know what mattered. You are still arrogant. I am working on it. She almost smiled. Almost. I have been reading letters, she said quietly. Letters you wrote after the divorce. Dominic's heart stopped. What letters? Serena pulled a bundle of envelopes from her purse. Yellowed with age. Worn from repeated reading. You sent them to my old apartment. The one I lived in before we got married. My landlord forwarded mail to my aunt's house for years. And she kept them from you. She thought she was protecting me. She only confessed last month, when she found out about everything that happened. Dominic stared at the letters. His handwriting on the envelopes. His desperate attempts to find her, to explain, to apologize. 63 letters over 2 years. Serena continued. Apologizing. Explaining. Begging me to let you make things right. You never got them. No. But I have them now. And they... She stopped, composing herself. They changed things, Dominic. Not everything, but things. I meant every word. I know. That is what makes this so hard. She met his eyes. I spent 9 years hating you. Turning that hatred into fuel, into motivation, into the wall that protected me and our sons. And now I have to figure out what to do with all that energy when the hatred does not fit anymore. You do not have to figure it out tonight. Or this year. Or ever, if that is what you need. Dominic reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. I am not asking for forgiveness, Serena. I am not asking for us to go back to what we were. I am just asking for the chance to be present. To be the father our sons deserve. To be whatever you might someday need me to be. Serena looked at his hand. Then, slowly, she covered it with her own. The man who wrote those letters, she said quietly. The man who risked his life for his sons. The man who learned to cook and rented a small apartment and shows up every single day. That man might be someone I could eventually trust again. It is not the same man who hurt you. I promise you that. I know. She squeezed his hand. That is why I am here. 1 year after the warehouse, Serena finally agreed to visit the penthouse. Not to move in. Not to resume their old life. Just to see what Dominic had done with it. He had transformed everything. The sterile, magazine-perfect spaces had been replaced with warmth and color. Children's artwork hung on the walls. Board games cluttered the coffee table. A basketball hoop stood in what had once been a formal sitting room. You turned your penthouse into a home, Serena said, astonished. It was never a home before. It was just a very expensive waiting room. Dominic watched Julian and Sebastian race through the space, exploring, claiming it with the natural entitlement of children who knew they were loved. I was waiting for you. All those years. I just did not know it. That night, as the boys slept in rooms Dominic had decorated with their specific interests in mind, Serena stood with him on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. When you called me that night, Dominic said quietly, your voice was shaking. You told me the truth about our sons. You said they were in danger. And in that moment, everything I had spent 9 years building became meaningless. The only thing that mattered was getting to you. Getting to them. I almost did not call. Serena's voice was soft. I spent 2 days convincing myself there had to be another way. That I could handle it alone, the way I had handled everything else. What changed your mind? The boys asked about you. That night, after I paid the partial ransom and got them back temporarily. They asked if the king from the story could help save them. She turned to face him. And I realized that keeping them from you, keeping us from you, was not protecting anyone anymore. It was just punishment. Mine and yours. I deserved the punishment. Maybe. But they did not. And I was so focused on my own pain that I almost let it hurt them too. Dominic took her hand. I spoke to Victor's prosecutor last week, he said. He is asking for reduced sentencing, claiming he was mentally unstable. Will it work? No. His lawyer tried to contact me about making a statement on his behalf. I told him I would testify to every single thing he did. The photographs, the lies, the kidnapping, the threat to sell our children. I will make sure the jury understands exactly what kind of man they are dealing with. Good. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker. The boys asked me something yesterday, Serena said eventually. What? They asked if the story was over. The fairy tale about the king and queen. They wanted to know how it ended. What did you tell them? Serena turned to face him fully, and in her eyes, he saw something that had been absent for 9 years. The beginning of trust. The possibility of forgiveness. The fragile, precious potential of a second chance. I told them we were still writing it, she said. But I thought maybe it was time for the queen to come home. Dominic's breath caught. Serena. Not all at once. Not like before. But, she squeezed his hand. The boys need their father. I need to stop running from my own life. And maybe we both need to stop letting fear decide our future. I will spend every day proving you can trust me. Every single day. I know. She smiled, and for the first time in nearly a decade, the expression reached her eyes. That is why I am here. In a penthouse that had finally become a home, a family that should have been was beginning to emerge from the ashes of what could never be reclaimed. The past was gone. 9 years of separation. Of struggle. Of choices made in fear and paid for in loneliness. But the future was unwritten. And sometimes, the second story is better than the first. Not because it erases the pain of what came before, but because it is built by people who finally understand what they almost lost. And who choose, every single day, to hold on tighter. Welcome home, Dominic whispered. And this time, the words meant everything they were always supposed to mean. If you stayed until the end, I want you to know something. This story is not just about second chances. It is about the courage it takes to admit when you are wrong. The strength it takes to rebuild what you destroyed. And the faith it takes to believe that people can change. Dominic Ashford was not a perfect man. He made choices that cost him everything. But when he was given one chance to make things right, one opportunity to save the family he never knew he had, he ran toward it. Not away. That is what separates the people who stay stuck in their mistakes from the people who learn from them. The willingness to try. To show up. To do the work, even when it is hard. Even when you are scared. Even when you do not know if it will be enough. Because love is not about being perfect. It is about being present. So here is my question for you. Is there something in your life that you have been running from? A mistake you made? A relationship you damaged? A chance you were too scared to take? What would happen if you stopped running? What would happen if you turned around and faced it? What would happen if you believed, just for a moment, that second chances are real? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is stuck in their own version of an empty penthouse, wondering if it is too late to change. It is not too late. It is never too late. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in stories that remind us what matters. Subscribe if you have not already. Hit the bell so you never miss another story from Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis. And remember, the best stories are not the ones where everything goes right. They are the ones where everything goes wrong. And people find their way back to each other anyway. See you in the next one.